There are foods in your grocery cart right now that were dead before you picked them up. You bought them because they looked clean, convenient, modern, pre-washed, pre-cut, pre-packaged, ready to use. And they'll be moldy, slimy, or rancid within 3 days. Meanwhile, the dirty, whole versions of those same foods, the ones you passed over because they looked like too much work, would have lasted 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Some would have lasted months. You chose the convenient option. You chose the processed option. You chose the clean option. And you chose the option that spoils fastest. This isn't coincidence. This isn't bad luck. Every step of processing that makes food more convenient destroys something that was keeping it alive. And once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. Drop a comment right now. How much food do you throw away each week? How often do you find mold on something you just bought? Let us know, because what you're about to learn explains exactly why your groceries die so fast. Food 1. Pre-washed salad greens. Walk down the produce aisle. You see a plastic clamshell of spring mix. Triple washed, ready to eat. Perfectly clean leaves. No dirt, no blemishes. You buy it. 3 days later, it's brown slime at the bottom of the container. Right next to that clamshell was a whole head of lettuce. Dirt on the outer leaves. Rough edges. You didn't buy it because it needed washing. 2 weeks later, that lettuce would still be crisp. What's the difference? The washing, the cutting, the packaging. When lettuce grows, its outer leaves develop a waxy coating called the cuticle. That coating protects the inner leaves from moisture loss and bacterial contamination. The leaves also harbour beneficial bacteria on their surface. These bacteria compete with spoilage organisms. Pre-washed salad goes through industrial washing, high-pressure water jets, chlorine rinses. Every trace of the protective coating is removed. Every beneficial bacterium is killed. The leaves are now sterile and defenseless. Then they're cut. Cutting damages cell walls. The interior of the leaf, which was never meant to be exposed to air, is now open. Oxidation begins immediately. The damaged cells leak fluids. Those fluids pool at the bottom of the container, creating a perfect breeding ground for bacteria. Then they're packaged in plastic, sealed. The damaged, wet, defenseless leaves are trapped in an enclosed environment. Any bacteria that enters has no competition. It multiplies in the pooled liquid. Within 72 hours, the entire container is compromised. The triple washed label doesn't mean extra clean. It means triple defenseless. A whole lettuce head keeps its outer protective leaves until you're ready to use it. The leaves stay intact, undamaged, defended. You wash only what you'll eat that day. The rest stays protected. Convenience killed the defense system, and the salad dies in days. Food 2. Ground meat. You see ground beef in the meat case. Bright red, convenient, pre-ground, ready to cook. You buy it. 2 days later, it's grey and smells off. Right next to it was a whole roast. You didn't buy it because it required cutting. 5 days later, that roast would still be fresh. What happened? Grinding destroyed the meat's structure. A whole cut of beef has an exterior surface exposed to air and an interior that remains protected. Bacteria colonize the surface, but can't penetrate deep into the muscle tissue. When you grind meat, you take the exterior, with all its surface bacteria, and mix it throughout. You also create massive surface area. Every tiny particle of ground meat is now exposed to air, to oxygen, to contamination. The meat oxidizes rapidly. That bright red color, it's not natural. Most ground beef is treated with carbon monoxide to keep it red. The actual meat underneath is already oxidizing, already breaking down. The color is a lie. Grinding also ruptures cell membranes, fluids leak out, proteins denature. The meat becomes a nutrient-rich medium for bacterial growth. Any bacteria present, and there's always bacteria after grinding, multiply rapidly in that environment. A whole roast maintains its structure. The exterior may develop a protective pellicle in the refrigerator, a thin dry layer that actually inhibits bacterial penetration. The interior stays protected by the intact muscle tissue. The meat lasts 5 to 7 days easily. Ground beef goes grey and slimy in 48 hours. Processing created vulnerability, convenience destroyed preservation, The grinding killed the meat faster than time would have. Food. 3. Sliced deli meat. You see sliced turkey at the deli counter. Shaved thin, convenient, ready for sandwiches. You buy half a pound. 3 days later, it's slimy. Right next to the deli counter, there's whole-cured salami hanging. You didn't buy it because it required slicing. 3 months later, that salami would still be edible at room temperature. What's the difference? The curing, the fermentation, the intact exterior. Traditional cured meats like salami are fermented with beneficial bacteria. These bacteria acidify the meat, dropping the pH to levels where spoilage organisms can't grow. They also produce antimicrobial compounds. The meat is dried, which removes moisture that bacteria need. The exterior develops a protective white mold that prevents other molds from colonizing. This system works. The salami hangs for months, even at room temperature, and doesn't spoil. It ages. It develops flavor. It matures. Deli turkey is cooked, sliced, and packaged. No fermentation, no beneficial bacteria, no protective exterior. Just sterile meat cut into thin, vulnerable slices. When you slice meat, you expose the interior. The interior was protected by the exterior. Now it's open to air, to handling, to contamination. The thin slices dry out rapidly in your refrigerator. But they also absorb moisture from condensation. The surface becomes wet, then slimy. That slime is biofilm. Bacteria colonizing the undefended surface, multiplying in the moisture, creating a visible layer of contamination. The sliced deli meat has no immune system, no fermentation culture to fight back, no protective exterior, just vulnerable surfaces waiting for bacteria. Whole-cured meats last months. Sliced deli meat lasts days. Convenience destroyed the preservation system. Food. 4. Pre-shredded cheese. You see a bag of shredded mozzarella. Convenient. Ready to sprinkle. You buy it. 5 days after opening, it's moldy. Right next to it was a block of mozzarella. You didn't buy it because it required shredding. 2 weeks later, that block would still be fresh. What's the difference? The rind, the shredding, the anti-caking agent. Cheese develops a rind as it ages. That rind is protective. It's drier than the interior. It often contains beneficial molds or bacteria that colonize during aging. Those organisms prevent harmful molds from taking hold. When you shred cheese, you remove the rind, you expose the moist interior. You create massive surface area. Every shred is now vulnerable to mold spores. But it gets worse. Pre-shredded cheese is coated with cellulose powder to prevent clumping. That's wood pulp. The cellulose absorbs moisture from the cheese and from the air in the bag. It creates a coating that traps moisture against the cheese surface. Mold loves moisture. The anti-caking agent creates the perfect environment for mold growth. The cheese doesn't dry out naturally like a block would. It stays moist, coated in cellulose, vulnerable. A block of cheese can develop surface mold, but you can cut it off. The interior remains protected by the intact structure. The cheese regulates its own moisture through the rind. Shredded cheese has no such protection. The moment you open the bag, mold spores enter. They land on the moist, cellulose-coated surfaces. Within days, the entire bag is compromised. Convenience created vulnerability. Processing destroyed the defense system. The cheese dies in days instead of weeks. Food. 5. Sliced bread. You see a loaf of sliced white bread. Soft, convenient, pre-sliced, ready for toast. You buy it. 5 days later, it's covered in mold. At the bakery section, there's a whole sourdough loaf, unsliced, crusty. You didn't buy it because it required cutting. 2 weeks later, that sourdough would still be edible. What's the difference? The crust? The slicing? The fermentation? Sourdough bread is made with wild yeast and lactic acid bacteria. Those organisms ferment the dough. That fermentation produces lactic acid and acetic acid. The acids lower the pH of the bread. That acidic environment inhibits mold growth. The crust of sourdough is thick and dry. It protects the soft interior from air and moisture. As long as the loaf stays whole, the interior remains defended. When you slice bread, you expose the interior crumb to air. The crumb is moist and porous. perfect for mold spores. The sliced surfaces dry out, but they also provide entry points for contamination. Commercial white bread is made with commercial yeast. No lactic acid bacteria, no fermentation, no acidification. The pH stays neutral. Mold grows easily on neutral surfaces. The bread is sliced at the factory. Every slice is exposed. The bread is sealed in plastic. That plastic traps moisture. The moisture condenses on the sliced surfaces. Mold spores that entered during packaging have moisture, neutral pH, and no competition. The bread molds in days. Even with preservatives, it molds. Because preservatives only delay mold, they don't prevent it. And once the preservative concentration drops through evaporation, the bread is completely defenseless. Sourdough doesn't need preservatives. It has acid, it has thick crust, it has protective structure. It lasts 2 weeks unsliced. Sliced white bread lasts 5 days. Convenience destroyed the preservation. Food. 6. Washed mushrooms. You see a container of white mushrooms. Cleaned, trimmed, convenient, ready to cook. You buy them. 3 days later, they're slimy and dark. Right next to them were dirty mushrooms with stems and dirt still attached. You didn't buy them because they needed cleaning. 7 days later, those mushrooms would still be firm. What's the difference? The washing, the trimming, the moisture. Mushrooms are not plants, they're fungi, their structure is delicate, their surface is porous. When you wash a mushroom, water penetrates the tissue. The mushroom absorbs water like a sponge. That absorbed water has nowhere to go in a plastic container. The mushrooms sit in their own moisture. The surface becomes waterlogged. Bacteria colonize the wet surface. The mushrooms begin to break down. Within days, they're slimy, dark, and decomposing. The stems and root base of mushrooms serve a purpose. They protect the cap, they regulate moisture. When you trim mushrooms at harvest and wash them, you remove that protection and add moisture. Dirty mushrooms with stems attached stay dry. The dirt on the surface isn't contamination, it's protection. The dirt absorbs excess moisture. The stems keep the caps from touching each other and creating moisture pockets. You brush off the dirt right before cooking. The mushrooms stay firm, dry, and protected until you need them. Washed and trimmed mushrooms are convenient. They're also dying from the moment they're packaged. The washing didn't clean them, it killed them. Food. 7. Ultra-pasteurized milk. You see a carton of ultra-pasteurized milk. Shelf-stable for months unopened. Convenient. You buy it. 3 days after opening, it smells sour. At a local farm, there's raw milk or lightly pasteurized milk. You didn't buy it because it seems risky. That milk, if it spoils, would turn into clabber. Thick, tangy, still usable. What's the difference? The temperature, the bacteria, the ability to transform versus rot. Ultra-pasteurization heats milk to 280 degrees Fahrenheit for 2 seconds. Every bacterium dies. Good and bad. Every enzyme is denatured. The milk is completely sterile. That sterility is why it lasts months in a sealed container. Nothing alive to break it down. But the moment you open that container, environmental bacteria enter. And those bacteria face zero competition. The milk has no beneficial bacteria to fight back. No lactoferrin to bind iron. No lysozyme to break down bacterial cells. Nothing. The contaminating bacteria multiply freely. The milk doesn't sour cleanly. It doesn't ferment into anything useful. It just goes off. Rancid, unpleasant, unusable. Raw milk or lightly pasteurized milk contains beneficial bacteria. If that milk begins to spoil, those bacteria ferment it. The milk clabbers. It thickens. It becomes yogurt-like. You can strain it into soft cheese. You can use it in baking. It transforms rather than rots. Ultra-pasteurized milk can't transform. It can only decompose. Convenience gave you extended shelf life while sealed, but it also gave you a product that dies rapidly once opened and dies badly. The processing destroyed the milk's ability to defend itself or become something useful. Food. 8. Pre-cut fruit. You see a container of pre-cut pineapple. Convenient. Ready to eat. perfect cubes in juice. You buy it. 2 days later, it tastes fermented and wrong. Right next to it was a whole pineapple. You didn't buy it because it required cutting. 5 days later, that pineapple would still be fresh. What's the difference? The skin, the cutting, the juice. Pineapple skin is thick, waxy, and protective. It's designed to protect the fruit inside from insects, bacteria, and moisture loss. The fruit stays in its own controlled environment until you cut it. Pre-cut fruit is skinned, cored, and cubed. Every piece is exposed. The cells are ruptured. The sugars are exposed to air and bacteria. The fruit starts breaking down immediately. Then it's packaged in juice, usually pineapple juice, to keep it looking fresh. But that juice becomes a medium for bacterial and yeast growth. The sugars ferment. The fruit becomes soft, mushy, and off-tasting. The container might say, fresh cut, or ready to eat. What it should say is actively decomposing. A whole pineapple maintains its protective skin until you're ready to eat it. You cut only what you'll consume. The rest stays protected. The fruit lasts 5 to 7 days easily. Pre-cut fruit lasts 48 hours before quality degrades noticeably. Convenience destroyed the natural protection. Processing created vulnerability. The fruit dies faster because it was cut faster. Do you see it now? Every food on this list shares one thing: processing speed and convenience are directly correlated with reduced shelf life. Every step that makes food more convenient, pre-washing, pre-cutting, pre-grinding, pre-slicing, pre-shredding, removes something that was preserving it. Protective coatings, beneficial bacteria, intact structures, defensive rinds, fermentation cultures, whole cell integrity, modern food processing optimized for convenience, for speed, for clean appearance, for ease of use. It did not optimize for preservation, for shelf life, for living defense systems. The result is food that looks perfect when you buy it and dies within days. The whole versions of these foods, the ones that look like more work, that look dirty or inconvenient, last 2 to 3 times longer, sometimes 10 times longer, not because they're better food, because they still have their defenses intact. You've been taught that processed equals advanced, that clean equals safe, that convenient equals better. But processed means stripped. Clean means defenseless. Convenient means vulnerable. And vulnerable food spoils fast. You don't have to buy any of the foods on this list. Here's what to buy instead. Buy whole lettuce heads. Wash leaves as you use them. Keep the outer leaves on until needed. Buy whole cuts of meat. Grind them yourself if you want ground meat, or buy from a butcher who grinds fresh daily. Buy cheese blocks. Shred them yourself. Keep the rind on until you're ready to use the cheese. Buy whole loaves. Slice them yourself. Seek out sourdough. The fermentation protects it. Buy dirty mushrooms with stems. Brush them clean right before cooking. Buy the least processed milk you can access legally. Or buy regular pasteurized and culture it into yogurt yourself. Buy whole fruit. Cut it fresh. The 5 minutes of work will give you food that lasts a week instead of 2 days. The pattern is simple. The closer food is to its whole, intact, natural form, the longer it lasts. Every processing step trades shelf life for convenience. Choose accordingly. The 8 foods on this list are not uniquely bad. They're just the clearest examples of what happens when processing removes natural defenses. You could make this list 100 items long. Pre-peeled garlic, bagged apple slices, pre-cooked rice, skinless chicken, peeled carrots. Everyone spoils faster than the whole version, because everyone has been stripped of its protections. Medieval people didn't have the option to buy pre-cut, pre-washed, pre-packaged food. They bought whole. They processed at home, right before use. And their food lasted longer as a result. Not because their food was better, because it was whole. Your convenient food is rotting in your refrigerator 3 days after purchase. Not because you did something wrong, because the food was killed before you bought it. The choice is yours. The knowledge was never lost. It was just buried under a century of convenience marketing. And every time you buy whole instead of processed, you reclaim the food preservation wisdom that kept people fed without refrigeration, without plastic, without waste. If this changed how you shop, hit that like button. Subscribe because we're exposing the systems that create waste while claiming to be advanced. Share this with someone who's tired of throwing food away. Send it to anyone who thinks convenience always equals better. Subscribe. Let's keep digging up what they buried.